You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
Month or so, we get the benefit of the wisdom and expertise of coaching guru Wayne Goldsmith on a range of different coaching and wider sporting issues. Wayne, welcome in. I want to talk today about reviews, end of season reviews, end of Olympic campaign reviews, that sort of thing. You've done dozens and dozens of these. So where do you start, and what are the things that you look at?
Well, that's a really good question, Piney, because I'm in the middle of two or three now. I'm in the middle of two in Australian football codes and different codes, and a couple in Olympic sports. And I know when they ring me and they say, how would you go about doing a review? I always think of the Liam Neeson line from Taken, where he says, I've developed a very special set of skills that make me a nightmare for people like you, because what I say to people is, they say, what are you going to look at? And I say, everything and nothing. And I'm becoming very zen, I think, as I get older, because I think if you go and you start a review with a preconceived notion of saying, I think from a distance it looks like this, you'll end up only looking at one thing. Whereas quite often what's required is you come in and you've got to look at everything. And so I often say to people, look, I'll look at things like the culture and coaches and the players and your roster and your budget and facilities, and importantly, the interaction between all those things. So like I said, we look at everything and we look at nothing.
So then when you've established, a bit of understanding about the different parts of the organisation, the different parts of the campaign, players, coaches, culture, leadership, all those things you've mentioned and more, then what, Wayne?
Well, it's a matter of coming in and spending time talking to people about what their views are. Look, I actually say to clubs, the best time to do a review is about 6 weeks from the end of the year, because people are doing what they do. The danger in doing it, I find it all the time, Piney, is I come in and I do an end of season review, and people's reflection and the stories they tell about what they think happened is very, very different to maybe what actually happened. So you've got to look at the data, if there's data available. You've got to talk to people from different perspectives. And so you'll interview coaches, sports science, sports medicine staff, medical staff, management, players, of course, people around it, and develop an overall perspective of what may or may not be happening, because people's ability to tell a narrative of their own experience and their own contribution changes a lot at the end of the year. But you start to put everything together, and some of it is screaming. So, for example, you might go and do a rugby review and you might be looking at defence. Well, you can pull out so much data on tackles made, tackles missed. You can look at so much data on it, and that'll give you a bit of an insight into maybe the way that the defensive coach is working, or maybe their technical elements or the skill level of the players. So sometimes it's really easy because you've got data. Other times, things like leadership, communication, relationships, culture, they're hard to see, hard to measure, particularly at the end of the season. So a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. It is like putting a puzzle together to try and find the real truth. And, that great phrase I use often is, it's no good coming up with a great solution to the wrong problem. So that quite often I'll go in and they'll say, what do you think? I'll say, I think it's a culture thing. And they go, thanks, Wayne, we're going to build a new gym. And it's got nothing to do with the culture. But because you can see a gym, you can buy a gym, you can build an extension to a part of the ground, because you can actually see those things. Quite often people will do that rather than address what the real problem might be.
You sent me a neat little, quite a few neat little sort of things as part of your notes for this particular segment. You talk here about the 3S model when you're looking at what's working and what's not. Things you need to sustain, stop, and start. Can you just unpack that a bit for us?
Yeah, I think in the end, all of the best reviews I do come down to a very simple concept, which is, what is it that we're doing that we should sustain, keep doing? What is it we're doing that's working? Because just because a team might have come 10th, it doesn't mean everything's wrong. I think what people make a mistake in reviews, Piney, they go, well, we came 10th, therefore everybody and everything's wrong, and let's throw it all out and start again. It's never really the case. There's always some things that are working, and maybe they're just not working in the right way, or maybe they don't have the right resourcing, or they're not being used at the right time, or there's some political roadblocks there. So I say to people, there's going to be something that's working. There'll be some things that you go, you know what, our defence is really good, our communication is great, the connection between the players and the coaches is great. All right, let's keep that. That's solid gold. And then there'll be some really obvious things that you should stop doing. So it'll really scream, because people are very good at identifying problems, much better than identifying things that are working and going well. So they'll say, guys, so these are the things we know that are impeding our progress and not helping us get better. We stop that. And then, of course, everybody learns. So the third thing is, so it's keep doing, stop doing, start doing, or sustain, stop and start. And then there's some things that you'll learn watching the better teams, by studying, by research, by reflecting, by looking at what you're doing. You'll go, you know what we learnt this year? We shouldn't do that. We should change this. We should add that. So when I get around to reporting it back to coaches and boards and executives, say, guys, keep it simple. This is what you're doing that's working. This is stuff that's not working. And here's some suggestions for how to make it better.
Do you need to challenge yourself, or be ready to challenge yourself as an organisation? Because I'm sure you could do a very good review for somebody and present it to them, all your findings, all the data that backs it all up. But an organisation still has to be willing to be open to change, don't they?
Yeah, they've got to be. There's a great line I love is, when the student is ready, the teacher shall be found. I think when they're ready to learn, that it's quite easy. It's believe it or not, this job's a lot simpler than people think. Because if you've been around a little bit and you're open-minded and you spend time really listening to people, the problems are normally right in front of you. But there's blockages. Either you don't like them, or you've got a political issue, a personality conflict. Quite often, if you're immersed in the environment, you don't see the obvious. And as a great friend of mine, Jackie, may she rest in peace, Jackie used to say to me, Goldie, you are the master of the bloody obvious. And I said, but Jack, that's what it is. There's most of the time, what's not working, or the problems that are holding people back from realising their potential are really obvious. They're right in front of them, but they're blinded because of proximity. They're too close to them to actually see what's screaming out to someone independent. And that's good, because that pays my mortgage. I like coming in and just pointing things out to people that they already know, Piney. You often say to people, I'm not particularly clever, and I'm really not. I'm not particularly clever. I'm not particularly brilliant. All I'm doing is pointing out what's right in front of you that you can't see. It's very rarely you'll come in and go, I've got a revolutionary breakthrough idea that you've never thought of. Most of the time you're pointing out things that they already know, but they just can't see them because they're too close to them.
Have you ever been in a situation where you've been commissioned to conduct a review, and then somebody who's in charge at the organisation has said to you, hey, it'd be really good if you could actually find this, almost, I guess, trying to predetermine what you're going to find in your review?
Oh, mate, it happens more than I'd like to think about. But God, there was a funny story years ago. I got called by a CEO of one of the Melbourne-based AFL clubs, and I came in. We went through the terms of reference of the review, talked about and he was passionate, and he talked about we want to get better, we want to be competitive, we want to grow our fans, we want to be seen as having an exciting type of football. He's really excited. Anyway, I go back to my hotel that night, and my phone rings. So I picked it up. Hey, Wayne Goldsmith, how you going? And it's the chair of the board of the football club. And he said, Wayne, look, I've heard you're in town. I know you're here to do the review. I wonder if you've got time to catch up. And turns up, picks me up in a nice car, takes me out to the Melbourne water, the bayfront. And we're sitting there having a nice meal, just talking footy and performance and sport and kids and everything else. And he said, Wayne, I want to tell you something. He said, I want you to find this. And he gave me a little piece of paper. God, I wish I kept that piece of paper, Piney. And he gave me a little piece of paper, and on it, it had sack CEO, remove head coach. And he looked me square in the eyes, a very well-known media identity as well. And he looked me square in the eyes and said, if you want to get paid, that's what you're going to find in your review.
Wow.
And because I was taken aback. I waffled a bit, I think, and said, oh, look, I want to do, he said, Wayne, do whatever you like. Look at everything, come up with whatever process you want. But if you don't find those things, you won't get paid. And it was a challenge, mate, because you try to live a life of ethics and business principles, and someone looks at you from a high profile and says, if you don't find this, you're not going to get paid. So I went away and I thought about it overnight and talked to a great friend of mine also in the business. And what we ended up doing is I did the review, and I had an agreement that I would give it to the chairman to look at first, which I did. And as it turns out, he was pretty much on the money. But, yeah, you get that from time to time. And because I think, that great phrase, to someone with a hammer, every problem is a nail. If you get someone to do a review who's an attacking rugby coach, they're going to come and say, you know what, you guys don't attack as much as you should. Or if you get someone who's a physiotherapist, they'll come in and go, you know what, you're not doing enough in the injury management space. Whereas the reality is it's never one thing. It's always a blend, an integration. It's several things that are happening concurrently. It's very rarely you walk in and you go, you know what, guys, change that one thing and I guarantee everything will be successful. And if anyone tells you that, you know that they're lying.
Just to bring it back to the concept of reviewing to finish, shouldn't reviewing be happening, sort of in an ongoing fashion, Wayne? You shouldn't have to wait till a point in time, be it at the end of the season or, as you suggested, 6 weeks from the end to review. Shouldn't you always be looking at your performance and reviewing what you're doing? Yeah,
that's really the bottom point, Piney. I should actually be out of business. Don't tell my wife I said that, but I should actually be out of business. I should have no work, because when you go into a really high-performing group, at the end of every training session, the coaches are sitting around having a coffee saying, hey, guys, what worked, what didn't work, and what should we change before the next session? They're living a continual review process, what we call, they live a continuous improvement culture. So after every session, after everything they do, they're continually saying, can we do better? And they've got a culture based on honesty where they can look at each other and say, you know what, Piney, I think you could have done that better. And then you, with trust and with connection with me, would go, really, Wayne? So instead of going, Wayne, you have no idea what you're doing, you would say, if in a culture that's working, a real performance culture, you would say, really, Wayne, what do you think I could do better? And you've got this open, sharing, transparent way of growing ideas, and you're in this continuous improvement culture. When you've got that, you're unstoppable. And that's what you would see walking into Penrith. That's what you would see walking into, I dare say, the Great All Blacks. That's what you'd see when you walk into an environment that's really clicking. They're living an environment of continuous improvement. And there's no need for knuckleheads like me.
Well, there always will be on this radio show. Wayne, your wisdom, your experience, your expertise is greatly appreciated by me and by our listeners as well. Always good to catch up. Let's do it again next month.
Can't wait, mate. Stay well.
You stay well too, Wayne. Wayne Goldsmith, their coaching guru and regular contributor on Weekend Sport. WGcoaching.com is his website. Heaps of great articles and pieces of advice on there and more about Wayne. But you can hear him here on Weekend Sport once a month or so, talking about a range of different issues.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.